One ingredient, a jar with a tight lid, and about 5 to 10 minutes of shaking is all it takes to turn heavy cream into real butter. No churn, no mixer required, no additives, and no trip to the store. This is not a shortcut or a substitute. What comes out of that jar is genuine butter, made by the exact same physical process a dairy farm used 100 years ago. And once you understand the simple science behind why shaking a jar of cream turns it into a solid block of fat, you will realize you have been driving to the store for something you could have made on your kitchen counter the entire time. Let us start with what heavy cream actually is, because understanding that is what makes the whole trick make sense. Heavy cream is an emulsion, meaning it is made of countless microscopic fat globules suspended and floating throughout a water-based liquid. Each of those tiny fat globules is wrapped in its own protective membrane, a thin protein layer that keeps the fat separated and evenly distributed rather than clumping together on its own. That structure is exactly what gives cream its smooth, pourable texture. Heavy cream typically runs somewhere between 36 and 40% butter fat, and that fat percentage is the single most important factor in whether this trick works quickly, works slowly, or does not work at all. Lower fat options like half and half or light cream do not carry enough fat to properly separate into solid butter, so heavy cream or heavy whipping cream is the one to reach for. Here is the actual mechanism at work. When you shake that cream vigorously and continuously, you are supplying mechanical energy directly into the liquid, and that energy is strong enough to physically rupture the protective membranes surrounding each fat globule. Once those membranes break open, the exposed fat is no longer kept apart. The fat globules begin colliding with each other as you keep shaking, and instead of bouncing off, they start sticking together, merging into progressively larger clumps. This process is called coalescence, and it is the entire secret behind turning a liquid into a solid using nothing but physical agitation. The process moves through a few distinct, genuinely recognizable phases as you shake. In the first phase, the cream thickens into something that looks and behaves exactly like whipped cream, since agitation is also folding air bubbles into the fat structure at this stage. If you kept going for a normal whipped cream recipe, you would stop right here, but keep shaking past that point and the structure that was holding the whipped texture together starts to collapse. You will feel and hear the change happening inside the jar. The light, fluffy resistance gives way to a heavier sloshing sound, and shortly after that you will feel an actual solid mass beginning to bounce and thump against the sides of the jar with each shake. That solid is your butter. The liquid still sloshing around it is buttermilk, the genuine, traditional byproduct of butter making, not the cultured products sold in stores under the same name, but real, fresh buttermilk nonetheless. The timing here depends on a couple of factors worth knowing before you start. Cream temperature matters more than most people expect. Cream that starts out slightly cool, somewhere around 55 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, tends to separate into butter faster and more reliably than cream taken straight from a very cold refrigerator. If your cream is ice cold, let it sit out for 10 or 15 minutes before you start shaking. Fat content matters just as much. True heavy cream at 36% fat or higher will consistently outperform a lower fat cream, both in speed and in how cleanly the butter separates from the liquid. And jar size matters more than people assume. Fill your jar only about halfway with cream. A jar that is too full does not give the fat globules enough room to actually move, collide, and merge, which is the entire mechanism this process depends on. Here is the moment that matters most, and it is genuinely easy to miss the first time you try this. Stop shaking the instant the butter fully separates from the liquid and forms a solid mass. If you keep going past that point, you will start reincorporating the buttermilk back into the butter, which will soften it, dilute its flavor, and shorten its shelf life. The transition from whipped cream to separated butter usually happens somewhere in the 5 to 10 minute range of continuous shaking, though shaking entirely by hand without switching arms can occasionally push that closer to 15 minutes. The moment you feel that solid mass clearly bouncing in a pool of thin liquid rather than a uniform thick texture, you are done. If your arm gives out before the cream does, you have other options that rely on the exact same principle. A stand mixer fitted with the whisk attachment, run on medium speed, gets you to separated butter in roughly 5 to 8 minutes with essentially no physical effort, though it helps to drape a kitchen towel loosely over the mixer and bowl once you get close, since the buttermilk tends to fling outward the moment the butter actually breaks. A food processor or a simple handheld immersion blender works nearly as fast. A jar is really just the manual, zero equipment version of the same mechanical agitation any of these machines are doing for you. If you are enjoying tricks like this one, things that trade 5 minutes of effort for a genuinely better result than the store version, subscribe to this channel right now and hit the bell. We bring back exactly this kind of forgotten, practical kitchen knowledge every single week. Once your butter has separated, pour off the buttermilk into a separate container and set it aside. Do not throw it away. Fresh homemade buttermilk is genuinely useful, excellent in pancakes, biscuits, waffle batter, or salad dressing, and it is a real bonus ingredient you get for free out of this process. Now comes a step that is easy to skip but genuinely affects how long your butter stays fresh: washing the butter. Any remaining buttermilk trapped inside the butter will cause it to spoil noticeably faster, so it is worth taking a few extra minutes to remove as much of it as possible. Add cold water to the jar, enough to fully cover the ball of butter, seal it, and shake again briefly. The water will turn cloudy as it pulls out residual buttermilk. Pour that cloudy water off, add fresh cold water, and repeat the process until the water you pour out runs essentially clear. At that point, you can also press and knead the butter by hand in a bowl of cold water, working out any remaining liquid, which helps the butter hold together into a firmer, longer-lasting block. Be mindful that warm hands will soften the butter as you work it, which is completely normal, since it firms back up once it goes into the refrigerator. At this stage, your butter is genuinely finished and ready to use exactly like anything from the store. If you want to take it a step further, this is also the point where you can mix in a pinch of fine salt. If you prefer salted butter, or fold in something like fresh herbs, roasted garlic, or a bit of honey to make a flavored compound butter that a store-bought stick simply cannot match. If you want to go one step further and make something closer to European-style cultured butter, the kind with that noticeably tangier, more complex flavor, leave your heavy cream out at room temperature for 12 to 24 hours before you start shaking, allowing naturally occurring bacteria to slightly ferment it first. This single extra step, waiting before you shake rather than shaking differently, is the entire difference between the mild, sweet butter most people are used to and the deeper flavored butter that costs considerably more per stick at a specialty grocery store. For storage, keep your homemade butter refrigerated at around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the same as any dairy product, and it will keep well for roughly 1 to 2 weeks. If you want it to last significantly longer, it freezes cleanly for several months, so making a larger batch and freezing portions of it is a completely reasonable way to always have a fresh supply on hand without needing to shake a jar every single week. The cost comparison is worth spelling out plainly. A pint of heavy cream typically runs somewhere between $3 and $5 depending on where you shop, and that pint yields close to a pound of finished butter, comparable to 2 standard store-bought sticks, plus roughly a cup of genuine fresh buttermilk on top of that. A quality stick of butter alone often runs close to that same price at the store, meaning the buttermilk you walk away with is essentially free, a byproduct most people are currently paying separately for in a completely different carton. What makes this trick worth doing regularly is not just the novelty of it, though the first time you feel that solid mass form inside the jar is genuinely satisfying. It is that you end up with real butter, made from one ingredient, with none of the stabilizers or additives, sometimes found in cheaper store brands, plus a bonus supply of fresh buttermilk, for the cost of a container of heavy cream and about 10 minutes of shaking a jar. One ingredient, one jar, and 10 minutes of shaking between you and real butter you made yourself. Try it this week with whatever cream is already in your fridge. The next video is already up. Go watch it now. Go.